The quiet edge of Europe's largest river became the stage for a moment that could have ignited an international incident. On the Dnipro at Kherson, at the very hour most of the world sleeps, an invisible confrontation began. Not with artillery barrages or satellite strikes, but with machines slipping through fog and frequencies skirting the edges of detection. What unfolded that night wasn't just another classified operation. It was the first time a mission hinged entirely on silence, signal, and split-second decisions in a corridor where every mistake would echo from Kyiv to Moscow. At 2:46 local time, a Ukrainian stealth craft designated Razor Line 3 entered the southern tributary of the Dnipro Delta. The mission was simple on paper: recover a crashed surveillance drone containing encrypted telemetry from the previous week's raids. But the wreck lay on the Russian-controlled bank, half submerged near an abandoned fuel pier. No direct assault was authorized. The plan relied on stealth, speed, and coordination between a drone relay, an electronic warfare escort, and a ground infiltration team inserted by river. Nothing in the briefing suggested what was about to unfold. The Razor Line hull was a prototype. Carbon composite, 6 meters long, painted matte gray to vanish under low-light optics. A compact diesel-electric hybrid allowed it to cruise at 10 knots without a sound. Its operator sat 20 kilometers away inside a buried container near Kherson, watching through a thermal feed streamed from a reconnaissance drone hovering above the river. That drone, call sign Ghost Eye, flew at 1,200 feet and carried the only uplink stable enough to reach both the boat and command center simultaneously. The relay chain was narrow, fragile, and crucial. Without it, the Razor Line was deaf and blind. The boat's first obstacle appeared before dawn. A drifting boom of Russian anti-drone nets stretched across the narrowest bend. The nets were meant to stop surface drones like the Barracuda class used weeks earlier, but this one hadn't been marked on the Ukrainian corridor maps. The operator cut throttle and let the boat idle with current. Overhead, Ghost Eye switched to infrared mapping, painting the river surface in slow sweeps. The obstruction showed up as a cold streak dividing the channel. 10 seconds of analysis confirmed it was anchored to both banks with steel cables and partially submerged float drums. Cutting through it would risk snagging the propeller. The only choice was to slip under. At 2:59, the operator engaged the ballast system. Small internal pumps that flooded the forward compartment with river water, sinking the bow by 20 centimeters. The Razor Line's silhouette disappeared from surface radar. The hull scraped the lower edge of the barrier and shuddered once, but the propeller cleared clean. When it surfaced again on the other side, the feed remained stable. The operator exhaled and adjusted course 1 degree west toward the retrieval zone. The telemetry beacon from the crashed drone pulsed faintly on the encrypted channel, steady and unbroken. The plan was back on schedule. The Ukrainian ground team, 4 soldiers from the 57th Separate Motorized Brigade, had already crossed earlier using inflatable rafts under cover of fog. Their task was to secure the site perimeter and attach the recovery cradle to the downed drone before exfiltration. Communication was restricted to line-of-sight laser bursts relayed through Ghost Eye. That meant each movement had to align perfectly with the drone's orbit and the boat's approach. Any deviation would break the chain. At 3:07, Team Lead Horizon confirmed visual on the crash site. The drone wreck was partially buried in reeds, one wing section visible, still blinking its locator diode once every 4 seconds. No Russian patrols detected. Then the signal distortion started. Soft static at first, then full-frame dropouts. Command logged a sudden interference spike on the 3.8 gigahertz band. Russian electronic warfare units had switched to night cycle scanning mode, sweeping the lower delta for activity. Ghost Eye's data stream fractured into brief bursts of clarity, followed by complete blackout. Without stable uplink, the Razor Line's operator lost visual confirmation. He reverted to precise reckoning, steering blind for 60 seconds while telemetry lag rose to half a second. On the ground, Horizon's team froze. They were within 50 meters of the wreck, but refused to move without confirmation that the boat was still inbound. Command activated contingency link Mirror 2, a backup relay drone staged 40 kilometers upriver. It climbed to 2,000 feet, establishing a high-angle beam to cut through the jamming cone. The adjustment worked, but at a cost. Russian radar detection arrays immediately logged the altitude spike. Within 3 minutes, a pair of Orlan observation drones began moving toward the emission source from the eastern bank. The operation had been invisible. Now it was being hunted. By 3:19, Razorline 3 reached the west inlet opposite the wreck site. The boat idled in shadow, while the operator switched to passive mode. Horizon's team crawled through reeds until they reached the drone carcass. Its nose cone was cracked open, core module still intact, cooling fins hissing with trapped heat. The retrieval cradle, a collapsible carbon frame, snapped around the wreck in 30 seconds. They radioed a coded pulse, package ready for extraction. The operator acknowledged. The problem was that extraction required crossing 70 meters of open water, directly under Russian observation arcs. Ghost Eye's thermal view caught movement on the far ridge, 2 heat signatures, possibly a recon patrol, scanning the bank with handheld optics. The order came instantly: delay extraction, hold position. Horizon's team flattened in the mud. The Razorline drifted closer at idle power, hugging the western reeds. Its electric motor emitted almost nothing, just a faint vibration below the ambient river noise. The operator checked battery load, 84%, enough for 4 more hours of silent running. He switched feeds back to narrowband, cutting data throughput in half to stay beneath detection thresholds. The operation slipped back into the dark, but the river wasn't empty. At 3:27, Ghost Eye identified a moving thermal wake upriver. Another vessel, small, metallic, and fast. The system tagged it as a probable Russian inspection boat returning to base. Estimated intercept time, 5 minutes. Horizon's team received the alert, but they couldn't move without exposing the recovered drone. Command authorized Razorline to act as decoy. The operator advanced throttle to 20 knots, producing a clear wake signature visible on radar. Within 2 minutes, the Russian patrol altered course, chasing the false contact downstream. Horizon's team used the window to drag the drone crate into the shallows. As the patrol boat passed, Ghost Eye maintained visual confirmation. The Russian crew scanned the surface with flashlights, unaware they were following a remote-controlled hull. At 100 meters distance, the operator cut all power and dropped the Razorline into drift mode. It vanished from radar and sonar simultaneously. The patrol kept moving past the bend, its engines fading into background static. Mission clock, 0338. Horizon signaled, ready for pickup. The operator brought the boat back up on silent electric, nose toward the beacon, and eased into position 10 meters offshore. The cradle floated out under a tether. 2 of the soldiers waded waist deep, guiding the payload onto the boat's deck clamps. Magnetic locks sealed with a click audible even through the live feed. The recovered drone weighed 40 kilograms, just within safe balance limits. Once secured, Horizon triggered the final exfil beacon. Ghost Eye recalculated flight vector and signaled command. Phase 2 complete, extraction commencing. Everything depended on getting clear before the Russians realized they were chasing a ghost signal downstream. At 3:44, the first problem hit. Mirror 2, the high-altitude relay, began losing power. Battery temperature warnings spiked due to prolonged jamming exposure. The drone had 30 minutes of endurance left, barely enough to maintain coverage for withdrawal. Command ordered it to hold altitude and act as static node while Ghost Eye descended to replace it. The swap would leave a 60-second communication gap. The operator prepared for manual control, switching the Razorline to pre-programmed autopilot with minimal corrections. Horizon's team paddled back across using their inflatables, every movement slow, deliberate, and timed with the current. The blackout began at 3:46. For 60 seconds, the Razor Line was alone. The autopilot steered true, holding course through the center channel at 12 knots. Then static burst through the control feed. Russian counter-jamming swept across the lower delta, erasing signal across all civilian and military bands. The operator could no longer tell if the boat was moving, stopped, or captured. The screen froze on a single frame of rippled water. Somewhere in the dark, Ghost Eye fought to reacquire the link. When the feed returned 12 seconds later, the river looked different. Smoke trails drifted across the upper bank. The Russian patrol had doubled back. Ghost Eye's thermal scope showed 2 fast boats cutting downriver at full throttle. Their wakes converged toward the Ukrainian exfil route. Command ordered emergency diversion. The Razor Line was instructed to proceed east and draw pursuit away. Horizon's team was told to go silent and hide along the marsh edge until sunrise. The operator accelerated to maximum electric output, 28 knots, and sent the drone boat toward open channel. Russian radar caught it instantly. Tracers split the darkness. One shell hit the water just aft of the hull, spraying white foam across the lens. The operator jinked left and right, altering speed in erratic bursts to mimic evasive maneuvers. 0352. Russian intercept boats closed within 600 meters. Command authorized electronic support. The Sable 9 EW truck, positioned 15 kilometers west, activated its spectrum jammer on the 1.2 gigahertz band. The effect was immediate. Russian targeting radars blinked offline and both intercepts lost lock. But the Sable's beam also degraded Ukrainian control signals, forcing the operator to fly nearly blind again. He relied on map overlay and precise reckoning, nudging the rudder half a second behind real time. The Razor Line plowed through shallow reeds, leaving shredded vegetation in its wake. Every second stretched into forever. When the interference cleared, the river widened into the open bay. The operator switched to hybrid mode, engaging the diesel assist. The noise would betray position, but double speed. The plan was to outrun pursuit long enough to hand off the payload to another unit waiting downstream. But fuel reserves were low, barely 30%. The hybrid mode burned fast. Ghost Eye tracked both Russian boats, slowing near the last bend, unsure which target was real. The jamming cloud made sonar useless. For the first time that night, the Ukrainians had the advantage of confusion. At 4:03, Command received a coded burst from Horizon's beacon. Team safe, hiding. Relief was brief. One of the Russian intercept boats had launched a small quadcopter scout, scanning thermals across the bay. The operator saw it on Ghost Eye's display, a white dot zigzagging 300 feet above the water. Range closing. Without action, it would spot the Razor Line and expose the recovery mission. Command authorized countermeasure Black Wing. A disposable mini-drone carried aboard the Razor Line for exactly this contingency. The operator armed it, flipped the safety interlock, and launched. The Black Wing shot upward at 40 meters per second, locked onto the intruding quadcopter's signal, and activated a micro-jammer tuned to its control frequency. The two drones collided midair and vanished from the feed. The operator watched both disappear into the river, leaving only static ripples. Ghost Eye confirmed no further airborne threats. The bay was momentarily clear. The Razor Line resumed course toward Extraction Zone Delta, 15 kilometers downstream, following the preset GPS corridor. The final obstacle came at 4:17. Russian forces reactivated the sector floodlights at the old bridge crossing. Bright arcs of white cutting through morning haze. The bridge was unmanned weeks ago, but now served as a checkpoint for any surface movement. Crossing under meant exposure. The operator slowed the Razor Line to 6 knots, aligned course with the deepest section, and shut down the diesel engine. The boat coasted forward on electric thrust alone. Overhead, Ghost Eye reduced altitude to 800 feet to minimize thermal signature. The operation entered its quietest moment, the kind where breathing too loud could ruin everything. When the boat cleared the bridge shadow, Ghost Eye sent a single pulse to command. Package clear. It was 4:24. The operator guided the razor line toward the Ukrainian-controlled bank and throttled down as the extraction beacon flared on the sandbar ahead. 2 technicians in camouflage waited out, attached grappling lines, and hauled the hull in by hand. The drone crate was intact, still locked to the clamps. The entire data core, 32 gigabytes of encrypted telemetry, was safe. Command logged mission complete at 4:31. Later analysis revealed that Russian patrols never discovered what they had been chasing. Radar playback showed a single, unidentified contact vanishing into jamming static, then reappearing too late for interception. To them, it looked like a glitch. For Ukrainian command, it was proof that the network held. The fragile relay of drones, boats, and soldiers operating as one machine across the electromagnetic chaos. The razor line was lifted onto a flatbed truck and covered under tarpaulin before dawn. By sunrise, the bay was silent again. The war would move on, but the river remembered.